You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
More than anything else, convenience stores are known as a destination for beverages. But what if those beverage sales went away because of concerns about plastics, whether it's plastic straws, plastic cups, plastic coffee cups? What happens to those sales? There are legislation and regulation going on now and consumer sentiment that might be pushing in that direction. So we're going to spend some time and we're going to talk about what are some solutions so that these what-if scenarios are much less likely. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name's Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And I'm Carolyn Schnare, also with NACS. And today we're joined by a couple experts who are going to talk to us about some solutions for the problems that Jeff mentioned in the beginning. We're joined by Rob Krupp, who is the co-chairman of Rich and Rhine Wholesaler, as well as Todd Gasparic, Vice President of Business Development for Smart Planet Technologies. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
So when we look at the issue of sustainability, there's a lot of things going on. There's 30 different states that have various regulations on some level related to beverages, plastic straw bans, bag bans, etc., coffee cups, composting. All these issues are now coming to the fore. At the same time, you see in consumer surveys, 3 out of 4 customers would support a business more if they knew about what the business was doing related to sustainability.
And Jeff, we've had issues like this come up in the past where we talked about healthy eating or soda bans or sugar taxes. But I don't think, we were talking just the other day, I don't think anything's come as quickly to the forefront as some of these sustainability issues.
I agree. It's something that every business is going to have to face over not necessarily the next few years, but perhaps as soon as the next few months. So how can we look at how do we sell beverages? Because I think the times, as Bob Dylan says, are a-changing.
So Todd, tell us, you're an expert on some of the trends as they pertain to cups and coffee and not coffee, but the things that things come in, I can't speak, the food service equipment and whatnot. So can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of trends you're noticing from your side?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carolyn. I think consumers have become aware of the issues with waste and are looking for brands and service providers they interact with to take or make sustainable choices in the products that they offer and the services that they provide. And for the convenience store industry, the goals would be to minimize the impact of the packaging used and efforts to ensure waste is managed optimally. And so if you think about a coffee cup, the traditional poly-coated paper cup, unfortunately ends up in the landfill because of the difficulty that the conventional recyclers have processing those materials through their machines. When it comes to a soda bottle, programs are being developed to offset the use of petroleum-based products, and we're seeing a lot of bioresins being introduced. And so there's a variety of different packaging applications that are really going to require the industry as a whole to take notice and start developing smart use of materials.
And that also goes by generations. I think every retailer seeks out, no matter what industry you're in, that you seek out the younger consumers. And they are, if anybody, driving this conversation about more sustainability and more earth-friendly packaging. Also, we have issues related to regulation, et cetera. So, Rob, are you hearing about the growing backlash, or can you talk a little bit about the growing backlash with products being sold at stores and how people are expecting solutions as fast as possible?
Sure, Jeff. Well, I believe that we're beyond the point of backlash from consumers at this point, and the elimination of non-recyclable items is a ticking clock, and bans are coming at an accelerating pace from a number of different municipalities. One of the major challenges that we see in our industry is that there's such a high percentage of purchases that leave the point of purchase immediately. So we need to find solutions for packaging types that are going to be easily recyclable and more sustainable wherever the end destination is for that product. And also for not only distributors and manufacturers, but also for store owners and operators sustainability and profitability don't need to be mutually exclusive activities. We can't afford to take sides regarding the environment at this point. So if we can find packaging solutions that are going to be effectively cost neutral for customers, but yet be doing the right thing in our business day to day, that's ultimately a win-win for every side of the equation.
So, Rob, you said some words there, and Todd, you did too. Feel free to jump in. But, Rob, you said recycled, recyclable, compostable. Can you real quick define that for our listeners? I know they're a little confusing.
Sure. Well, the main difference as far as we see it between recycling and compostability is with a recycling system, you're looking at a circular economy. So you're making something that can be turned into another product. If you're starting with a paper coffee cup, you're talking about something that is going to have multiple lives, and it's going to be something that might start off as a coffee cup, and then it has the ability to be turned into copy paper, drink trays, corrugated boxes, something like that. When you're talking about a compostable item, you're talking about something that is going back into the earth and has a single use to it. So, when we talk about the two items, we're definitely more proponents of recycling because you are creating a circular economy and getting away from single-use items. Now, that being said, everything going away from a landfill is definitely a step in the right direction for any product sales that we're looking at. But another important thing that I think that everyone needs to be aware of is just getting people away from wish cycling. And what wish cycling is really the process of people, and we've probably all done it at some
I'm
point.
guilty of that.
You put something in a recycling bin just hoping that it's eventually going to end up in the right place. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there's not always the ability for the recycling center to spot the error, to pick the item out of the bin that wasn't supposed to be there. And that could be a situation where you are defeating the value of not only the product that you put in there, but the entire batch, and potentially contaminating an entirely good batch of otherwise recyclable material. So we need to be careful about that as well.
You don't hear much about recycling of currently on a massive scale of coffee cups, for instance. Why is that? What are the materials that are currently in coffee cups that might either make it difficult for recycling, or people just aren't aware because they don't think they are recyclable or compostable?
Yeah, I think Jeff, this is Todd. I think that the problem is that the conventional paper coffee cup that we all know and use on a daily basis is made of a plastic coated paper. And unfortunately, paper recyclers are only after the fiber that's used to make those cups. And so when trying to collect a post-consumer cup that has a plastic lining on it, the recyclers struggle terribly to process those plastic-coated materials through the conventional paper recycling equipment. And so if you were to, at the risk of sounding technical, throw a bunch of paper products, paper cups into a blender, you'd end up churning up the fibers and the plastic coating. The fibers are lighter than water, so they would float to the top, but so would the plastic that's used, right, into these light, flaky particles. I use the example, if I told you to rip up a Ziploc bag into a million pieces, you could do it with some force, but you'd be left with a bunch of little fragments that are light and strong particles of plastic. And so unfortunately, those particles are what clog the equipment that's used to extract the fibers, which results in the cups not even being accepted in most cases by recyclers, and thus, diverting them to the landfill.
I think, Jeff, one of the reasons we need those, or people need to have those cups, is to keep the product that's in it hot, or in some cases cold. It's designed, that coating is at this point designed to make that product be the way you want to have it. And I mean, Todd, you can chime in on that.
Exactly right.
That's why it's there. It's not there to make the recycling a mess or to screw up the earth. There's a reason for it, but maybe there's ways to get around that.
Well, yeah, let me just add this. I think when cups were originally made, they were made with the intended purpose of keeping the drink in the cup, right? They used that plastic lining to seal the cup into its shape and at the same time serve as a barrier to the liquid so it doesn't leach through the paper. And unfortunately, when those cups were designed back in the day, they weren't designed with the environment in mind. And so now that the environment has started to become more of a priority, there's really three main priorities that we have to take into account. Number one is performance. That cup has to work. It can't leak. Number two the economics have to be in line because no one wants to pay more, regardless of whether they're going green or not. And step 3 is the environment. There has to be some real environmental gains associated with whatever sustainable solutions are being proposed.
One of the phrases that Carolyn and I have heard, Carolyn repeated it from a meeting she went to recently, is plastic has lost its social license. And by that, the idea that whether it's plastic bags, whether it's plastic straws, whether it's plastic water bottles, people are starting to look differently at people who consume these items. And I think, first off, it's a real education to when we talk about something and we use the phrase paper coffee cup, and it's not paper. It's paper and plastic. So that's an important differentiation for anybody that's thinking about how they go to market and what they sell. Now, we talked a little bit about recycling these cups. There's also the opportunity to compost these products, coffee cups, that is.
Well, as it relates to composting, I think it's important to speak to the difference between food waste in composting and then compostable bioresins that are used in compostable cups. These products break down at very different rates. Food scraps can break down in 20 to 30 days, where compostable bioresins can take upwards of 3 months. The other thing that needs to be known about that is that compostable packaging can really only be broken down in an industrial composting facility and not if somebody happens to be doing backyard composting at their home. What's not known by many people is that really about 3% of our country has access to industrial composting facilities. Using California as an example, and over 10% of our population, there's 143 industrial composting facilities in California. However, only 14, about 10%, of these facilities have the ability to take compostable packaging. Even fewer actually want to take that packaging, and a lot of that is that delta between how much time it takes for food scraps to break down versus what it takes for compostable bioresins to break down. So one thing, in a term that's used in just environmental circles about a misleading statement regarding the benefits of a product is the term greenwashing. And when people make misleading claims about the environmental benefits of a product, service, technology, something like that, what I think there's a lot of greenwashing going on with the composting industry because there is a desire for people to do the right thing. And again, anything that's not going to the landfill is a step in the right direction. But if we can't get compostable cups adequately composted, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the landfill. And so sometimes it's a diversion to the same end result that we don't want. And if you look at composting versus recycling, just about everybody has the ability to practice responsible recycling in their community, whereas the infrastructure for composting is much less developed. And not to mention, it usually, because of the cost of bioresins compared to the cost of producing a mineralized resin for a paper cup that could be recycled, it's a much more expensive product to create. So not only are you stepping away from the circular economy of sorts, you're also having a more expensive product to start with. And the last thing that I will say about plastic-coated paperboards or the traditional polyethylene-coated coffee cup, if these ever end up in compost, then you can be talking about leaching microplastics into the soil and water streams, and then getting toxic chemicals that get into our food stream. So people think they're doing good, again, and kind of wish cycling by getting this paper cup into the soil, but you could actually be doing more harm than good by contaminating the compost stream if you don't put the right products in there. So really just the education of the proper places to put your materials when you're done with them is a huge step in the right direction, and education is a big part of that.
So is the wish cycler in the room? Maybe Jeff is too, but yeah, I'm definitely the person who I've gotten better at it. I've definitely gotten better as I've educated myself more, but throw it in there. It'll find its way to the right place. Well, if I throw the wax coated or the plastic coated cup in there, maybe it'll melt in the process and it'll all be good. I can't do that anymore. And I guess I should stop burying everything in my backyard. I'm kidding. I don't do that, but it does say, compostable, and that's something. I guess what I'm taking away is it's somewhat of a misnomer. It is compostable somewhere, just probably not in your backyard. So I'll stop.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think what Rob said is spot on. I think that, compostability sounds like a great idea because it's better than the landfill in theory. But the reality is that the processability of those materials and the lack of infrastructure prevents us from actually having that be a real commercially viable solution, right? It's not a scalable solution. And so as we look through the hierarchy of end of life and what it means for a paper cup in this case, that paper cup is made of valuable virgin fibers that can be used up to 7 times over through the recycling process, whereas composting of those cups ends up being used once, and then those materials get wasted because the fibers are not being collected for reuse. And so I think composting, the green leaf on your cup might look pretty and make you feel good, but again, back to wishful thinking or wish cycling, as some people refer to it in the industry, it's a bit of a misleading scenario for consumers who don't take the time to really understand the impact of what's really going on behind the scenes. The first step to getting paper cups, recycled, or in this case, the value extracted, would be to make the paper products from materials that are easy for the recyclers to process into new recycled paper materials.
So you led right into my next question. What are some of the examples? So it's not a paper/plastic cup that does all these wonderful things about keeping hot, cold, and everything tasty. But how do you change that composition, and what exists out there, or what technologies were developed to make this possible for traditional recycling?
I think that with the intention of coming up with alternatives, we have to remember that those 3 pillars, right, those 3 sustainability pillars are of key importance. The cup has to work. It can't leak, like we talked about. The cup has to be cost effective, and certainly it has to have the environmental benefits. Some companies have taken the approach that they're going to come up with aqueous coatings, which is a fancy word of saying they apply a water-based coating on the printing press, which ultimately dries and leaves a bit of a particle that is going to have some level of barrier to it. They struggle with heat sealability, and they struggle with performance for barrier purposes. So there's a little bit of a rub when it comes to the innovation in that scenario. You've got others that are going into the bioresins, and again, the bioresins are driving those cups into the compost. And even though we don't have the infrastructure, even if we did, we would still be, wasting those valuable fibers. We, as a material engineering company, figured out that, again, the first step to getting paper products recycled is to make them valuable and easy for the conventional paper recyclers to process through their equipment. And so what we did was we blended minerals into the existing resin to make a mineral-enriched resin. And by doing that, we end up with an immediate plastic reduction, and also end up with a material that's actually extremely easy for the conventional paper recyclers to process through their current equipment, allowing for them to capture those cups just like they would uncoated paper.
So, Rob, tell me some more. Where is that available? Is that kind of product? I know you just said you had that kind of resin, and you were working with some technology that can do that. What's out there? What's the solution?
Well, the solution, as Todd spoke to, is having this mineralized coating, which has the plastic content low enough to where something can be processed through traditional paper recycling streams, is a technology that's out there and readily available for both hot and cold cups, having paper cups that could work for people's coffee programs, and then also for their soft drinks as well. This is also a technology that lends itself to work for CPG companies who are looking for something that can work in terms of moisture seals and humidity with, say, a candy product, while at the same time not allowing aromas to permeate it and disrupt that product, much in the same way that coatings that currently contain plastic have that. There's food service applications, so you could be looking at pizza boxes that might have a better seal to keep grease from the cheese or the oils from the pizza contaminating a cardboard box to where that cardboard box wouldn't be recycled. So across so many industries, you could be talking about food service packaging and sleeves for breakfast sandwiches or liners for pet food bags, or all these things where the the natural components of the product within that bag are compromised by the product itself, and this coating helps to maintain the seal and have a product that can still maintain a high value when you start with a high quality product and have it be recyclable and be reusable in a circular economy.
And it sounds like everybody loves convenience. So there are some communities that have single waste stream. You put all your recycled in one bin and they take care of it. There are others where you could put paper in one, plastic in another, glass in another. With this new type of packaging, I assume it just goes in the traditional paper recycling, that it maybe you rinse it out, maybe you get any food scraps or something like that off, but there is no additional recycling bin it needs to go into. It goes in with the newspapers or whatever else paper that you have. Is that a correct assessment?
I think that's correct, Jeff. And I think the important thing, too, is that obviously in a world of convenience, people want things to be as easy as possible. That mixed-use bin that a lot of us have at home that we use for all of our recycled materials, cans, bottles, glass, paper, they're all going in there. That is not the ideal system, but it's obviously the easiest system for people to manage at home. If we have paper cups that can go into a traditional paper bin, that is ideal. And when you have coffee cups that become the industry standard and can be recycled along with other paper products, that's great. You keep the cans separated, you keep the glass separated, and you clean up the overall origination stream for the recyclable items. You're going to have much higher quality materials. And in that sense, that's what's going to create the scenarios in which stores could ultimately find a way to turn the recyclable items into either a way to create additional profits for their stores by having quality recycling streams, or B, reducing their waste by having a lower amount of product going into waste and high quality recyclable items that can be picked up. So it's kind of a combination of the two factors that you can either offset your costs for waste collection and or create ways to profit by having an organized recycling system with separate bins that customers can use.
Well, and some of the work that we've been doing here at NACS that we've been putting out to our members has around improving your recycling at stores. And usually we ask people to focus, or retailers to focus on cans and bottles because it's easy and it's what most people have in their cars. But one of the things that most retailers do have is cardboard recycling, because they get all the supplies, all the CPG bottles, you name it, everything they're selling in a box generally. So cardboard recycling is prevalent at stores. And at this point, if they could recycle the cup of coffee that they just enjoyed from the store, sitting on the nice patio out front, they could put it in a bin and it would go right into that cardboard recycling, which the retailer already has and doesn't have to continue and grow a brand new program. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think you're dead on, Carolyn. I think the keep in mind that it's not the responsibility of the convenience store to solve the waste problem, but at the same time, it is the responsibility of convenience stores and various brands to do right by the environment by making smarter use of materials, so that there are materials that are post-consumer that are valuable for the recycling industry to do what it's best at, and that's extracting waste, or I should say extracting value from the waste. And so, just like you mentioned, in the case of cardboard, there's a tremendous amount of it used in a store. It ends up in the back of the shop. If we were to bale that up along with the paper cups, we now have a material that is valuable for those recyclers to come collect, because they can then take that back to the facility where they sort through it and then bale it up for sale to the recycled paper mills. And so, same goes for, as Rob said, the ability to throw it all into one bin. There are opportunities for the recyclers to take that bin and sort through it, but for the retailer who's looking to really capitalize on the value, if they were to take the time to separate those out, they would even get more value, because they'd be avoiding the recycler from having to do the separation themselves. And so there's really a variety of ways convenience stores could take steps to do the right thing. The simplest being make smarter use of the materials, certainly by requesting or using paper products that are using this mineralized resin. And then secondly, if they wanted to encourage their recycler to do the collection, there are now programs where they can actually not only enjoy an ability to have those materials collected as recyclables, which offsets the amount of waste that's being generated, but also earn potential rebates, as Rob was mentioning, by using materials that are valuable that can be then ultimately collected and sold by the recyclers to the recycled paper mills.
I think one of the things that we talked about is there's a lot of confusion out there, whether it's composting or recycling. And you had mentioned the green leaf on a coffee cup doesn't necessarily mean anything besides there's a green leaf on a coffee cup. So as we look at these programs and as we talk about what works and what can be recycled, I think the key is really educating consumers and retailers about what to do with a product. And then secondly, and that means which ones can get recycled. Are there certain marks that indicate that somebody can do this, or certain products? And then the second thing is, how do you get credit? Because we just did a consumer survey where we asked, should companies, and this is an overgeneralization, but should companies tell others that they do something good in the community, or is it table stakes and they should just be quiet because they should all be doing it? 90% of the public says you need to tell your story. So two-part question, and I'll let you guys decide how it gets answered, but how can people know certain products are recyclable? And secondly, how do you tell that story?
It's a great loaded question, or two-part question, that I think you're spot on with the question. Consumers don't know, and it's really compounded. The problem's compounded by the fact that all the different cups have all the different markings. I once heard it best described that if sustainable packaging bugs on the or claims on the cups were street signs, we'd be crashing all over the place, right? Because it's different in every city, it's different at every brand level.
Drive in DC, they already are.
That's right. I think it's really important to recognize that the first step to getting paper cups, in this case recycled, is to make them from materials that are valuable. We've kind of established that. Putting a marker on that cup is certainly important. At the same time, the first step is for the convenience stores to start getting the usage up so that the recyclers have valuable materials to collect. They're experts at extracting the value. And so if we were to put a bug on, or I use the word bug, it's an industry term for claim or a marker on a paper cup that leads the consumer to take action, it's really important that there be an easy way for them to do that. Putting a leaf or a recycle symbol on the cup tends to fall short of that. And so you'll notice if you go into an airport, they now have pictures of what goes into the individual bins in hopes of making it easier for consumers. For the person who goes into the convenience store and typically takes that cup out of the store, now what is really what it comes down to. And so the ideal scenario, and this is my personal opinion, would be that if all the paper mills were to make smarter use of materials and make paper products that were made using the mineral resin, we'd end up with all the paper cups being valuable. Now, with that not being the case in today's world, the second best thing would be, let's start by closing the loop. Let's encourage the brands to take ownership and make smarter use of materials, so consumers say, hey, look, if I buy that brand, I've got a material that's valuable for me to recycle, so I'm going to take that extra step because it's the right thing to do. And then thirdly, putting markers on the cups, if we do have enough usage, would potentially allow for the recyclers to do what's called optical sorting. And all that is a robot scanner, essentially, a bit futuristic, but is being used now in today's recycling facilities to identify the individual cups that are made with the mineral-enriched resin as opposed to the traditional plastic ones. So it's kind of a three-step process, and I think, Rob, you probably have some better experience in seeing what works and what doesn't, so I'll let you answer the other half of that.
Well, I just think the second part of Jeff's question regarding people being guarded about the success that they're having or what they might be doing in their particular business or their particular store, I think if we want to look at the big picture of what's going on, not only in our own country, but globally, is that what we want to do is help find a core technology that can be adopted by multiple industries as a whole, to where you can get to the point and say all paper is recyclable for food service packaging, for consumer product goods. And that hasn't been the case before. So when you get to that point, you don't want to have a situation where there's some level of exclusivity for any company, because recycling shouldn't be a privilege or a right to somebody who signed an exclusivity agreement on it. It should be something that everybody has access to. So I think that's really the key here, is finding a technology that can be available globally and just really be applicable across a litany of industries and give people the benefit of creating that circular economy of paper materials.
So we started the episode, we were talking about the threats that exist in food service packaging. And then we talked a little bit more about the solutions, and you told us about one particular solution that is almost readily available or is readily available to retailers and suppliers. And Rob, can you tell listeners where they can find the solution or the cup that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. Just to let everyone know, there is a commercially available paper cup that we've been referring to. And if you visit recup.earth/NACS, you can learn more about it. And if you go to that page, it'll tell you not only about the cup technology and the availability of that cup, it can also give you information about how to set up a closed loop system for your store. And as Todd had mentioned, how to create rebates and opportunities to potentially profit off of a positive recycling program that you have going on in your store. For those who aren't in the C-store business directly, this landing page, recup.earth/NACS, will also help you find out about other packaging applications that might be available using this technology.
Well, what I liked what you most said, among many things, is that these solutions, we are not going to solve a problem with exclusivity. We're going to solve it by working together, and that I think was a great direction forward that we can start taking. Recycle more of these items. We want to keep selling all of these drinks and beverages and snacks that we have in our stores. And we look forward to having continued conversations about how we can do so.
So thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, Todd, for being with us. And thank you for listening to
Thank you.
Convenience
Thank you very
Matters.
much.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.